The Jags look like, well, the same old Jags, and that's problematic. We'll go through it, and I'll tell you exactly why in just a second here on Locked On Jaguars.
You are Locked On Jaguars, your daily Jacksonville Jaguars podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Exactly right. It is your team every day here on Locked On Jaguars. We thank you for making us your first listen. I am Tony Wiggins, the host of the podcast that you can find over on the Locked On Jaguars YouTube page or wherever you get your podcast. We do appreciate you, the everydayers, for joining us. And if you're new, you can be an everydayer too. All right. Today's show is brought to you and sponsored by FanDuel. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. And that's exactly what we are going to do here today. I'm going to tell you exactly what we're going to be. Third final segment, lame ducks quacking. What do I mean by the lame ducks quacking? Well, find out by sticking around until segment 3. Subliminal finger point. I'm going to go back through some things that we saw that really probably set the template for this season to end up going exactly the way that it's going, and the reactions that you're now starting to get from some people about the lack of success has amplified that, and we'll go through that. First, we're going to talk about the Jags looking like the Jags. That'd be fine if the Jags were something pretty to look at, right? The thing is though, during this transformation the last couple of years when they actually did win more games than they lost, we started to think that they were changing and morphing into something else, right? It was the process that we were all bought into, and we were just saying, okay, it looks like it's getting better, it's improving, it's moving in a different direction. And then they come out this year with some new parts and new pieces, and they're supposed to take that next step. The problem is they're not even looking like the same Jags of the last 2 years. They're looking like the worst part of that. And the worst part of that still had the DNA of the bad Jaguars that they inherited back in 2020 and 2021, right? So now this team is starting to resemble, maybe not necessarily in play because they've been competitive in their first 2 games, but they are starting to resemble in attitude, in apathy, in the things that people are saying. Is now making me take a bigger look at things that I actually gave them the benefit of the doubt from. And I'm not wrong for giving them the benefit of the doubt, because that's what you're supposed to do. Let me tell you what happens if you don't. And I'll tell you why I did it. It's because if they start to look good like they did for 3.5 quarters or 2.5 quarters against Miami, then when it starts working, what are you going to say? And it's not just about saving face, but if you're always just openly critical, you can be skeptical. But hey, let me see what happens. You sit in a seat like this with the media. No fan wants to hear you constantly beat their team down. So let me see what happens. Let me give it a chance. Let me see if they're right. But there are things that I knew and I openly questioned. And anybody who listens to this show understands that I did that all the time. And I'm not the only one. So I'll say that, since fans keep telling me that all the time. I'm not the only one that was worried about certain stuff. Did they dump the wrong cargo? Or did they get rid of the cargo I'm talking about is the defensive staff and some of the former players? Did they dump the wrong cargo? Or was the cargo they got rid of not enough? Did they need to go further? And the tale of the Jaguars is if they never go far enough. Shad Khan has fired coaches. He's fired GMs. He's done all of that stuff since he's got here. He got here. Mike Mularkey was the coach. After 1 year, they let him go. We knew that was going to happen, right? And then they got Gus Bradley. Let him go. Probably a year too late. And then after Gus Bradley, it was Doug Marrone? Yeah. Wasn't it Doug Marrone that took over? Yeah. And then they kept him as a holdover. And then after that, it was the whole Tom Coughlin thing. You know, that was a part of it. And then with Doug Marrone and Tom Coughlin and Dave Caldwell. And then Coughlin left, and it was Marrone and Caldwell for a year or 2 years or something like that. And then it was Urban. Y'all know, it was Urban. And then they kept Trent Baalke around, who they kept from the last couple of years of Dave Caldwell too, and they kept Trent Baalke around. And I'm thinking, like, what is it about them that makes them believe that they never have to cut that umbilical cord, especially if it's rotten? Why do they always just keep attachment? And I'm noticing that there's a theme from the people that I talk to that while they list him as the general manager, Trent Baalke is pretty much running the team. If you haven't seen Trent Baalke at practice, I don't know if you've been to an NFL practice before, but usually at an NFL practice, if you see the GM, he's kind of just talking to the media off to the side, kind of walking around, just observing. And then you'll see him walk off. He'll go back to his office. Not Jacksonville practice. At Jacksonville practice, you have to wonder if Trent Baalke is the head coach or not. Not that he has a whistle, not that he's walking around and doing but he is walking in between players, clapping hands, talking to players. I've actually seen him instructing players before who are at the back of the line of the drills. It's weird. It's also weird to the players that it happens. It's weird to new players. It might not be weird to rookies because they don't know any better, but it's weird to new players that come here from other organizations. Like, the hell is that? It's just what it is. Going into meetings, telling coaches about who should play and who shouldn't play. And the reason I brought that up is because of the Mason Smith situation that everybody is speculating about. Mason Smith, the second-round pick, was a healthy scratch, while a seventh-round pick, who's also a defensive lineman, was activated. And the fans had to make a choice, like, who were they going to argue at about that? Who were they going to get angry at? Was it Doug Peterson, and was it Trent Baalke? Well, see, the thing is it looks bad for Trent Baalke, and I actually think that was part of the intention. I've heard for 2 straight years Doug Peterson wanted more offensive linemen on the first in day 1 and day 2 of the draft, and they didn't do it. Now, whether that's true or not, don't know. I'm telling you what I've heard. It isn't Doug Peterson's job to come out here in a press conference when he's asked, do you think the offensive line is good enough? And he goes, sure. Yeah, I think so. Because if he says no, what does that tell Trevor Lawrence? What does that tell the locker room? What does that tell everybody else? So sometimes we have to take an answer that people give us with a grain of salt and understand that it's counterintuitive for them to give us an answer that, while it may be true, it is just not good for them to tell us. Everything is a need-to-know basis, especially when you're dealing with people that have car accidents every single play while they're on the football field, and when you're dealing with people that have guaranteed money, and you have to motivate them, and you have to always just try to be as positive as you can and try to get the most out of them. I always call it extracting the most out of a player. You can't do that if you beat them down in the public. Matter of fact, if you ever did that to a player, he'd probably go to his agent and say, get me out of here right now. And he should. So we have to understand, just because you hear Doug talk about the offensive line and talk about being healthy, what you're probably hearing is the talking points of an organization that wants to have the appearance of being on one accord. And I understand that, and I get that. But the frustration I see on his face, especially with someone who's played the quarterback position, I see someone who doesn't think the offensive line is good enough. I see a play caller who calls plays based on the fact that that offensive line isn't good enough. And then every now and then, like the play in the end zone the other day when Trevor Lawrence got sacked for a safety, says, this is the best play we have. I probably shouldn't call it, but I'm going to call it anyway and hope that offensive line is good enough. Don't be mistaken in thinking that Doug isn't as close to Phil Rauscher as he is to Press Taylor, because he is. Don't be mistaken if all of those guys think that the person that's picking the players is the guy who is to blame. And also, don't be naive and mistaken in not thinking that the person who picked the players thinks that the problem is the people coaching the players, because that's why he always has to intervene. And don't think for 1 minute that that person isn't telling the owner whose ear he has, this is what's going on. There is no executive vice president. Mark Lampin is a good guy. He's a team president, but he's a businessman. He ain't in football operations like that. This team is run by Trent Baalke, and basically he reports everything to Shad Khan. The common denominator, and the reason why I talked about this team looking just like the other teams is because they have changed a whole lot of parts. They've changed players. They've changed management. The one thing that they have not changed from 2020 is Trent Baalke. They didn't change the owner because they're not going to do that either. It's Trent. And I know they've been closer, and I know they've gotten closer. The resources that they've used up does not match the results that they're getting. They have used Super Bowl type resources, whether it be first round picks, whether it be high number one picks, whether it be multiple number one picks or multiple day two picks, and a checkbook that doesn't look like it has limitations. They've done it all. And they're 0-2. And it's a very big possibility that they'll be 0-4. There's a bigger problem here than who worried about who the play caller is, even though that's probably problematic as well. And I don't know if I can say problem and problematic back to back, but I just did. We're going to discuss more of this. And I'm going to show you some examples of some subliminal finger pointing. And maybe if you look back at it, you'll see exactly what I do. We'll do it here on Locked On Jaguars in just a second. Today's show is sponsored and brought to you by LinkedIn. I made the mistake of thinking I can open a business without LinkedIn, and I learned from that mistake. So after that first time, the next 2 times I opened a business, I made sure I got in touch with them. Because if you're opening a small business, you're caught up in regulations and you're caught up in permits and you're not thinking about who's going to work here. LinkedIn will handle that for you. It's not just a job board. LinkedIn helps you hire professionals you can't find anywhere else, even those who are actively or not actively searching for a new job, but might be open to the perfect role. In a given month, over 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit other leading job sites. So if you're not looking on LinkedIn, you're looking in the wrong place. On LinkedIn, 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. Hire professionals like a professional on LinkedIn. Here's what you got to do. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnfl. That's linkedin.com/lockedonnfl to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Today's show is sponsored by Game Time. Game Time, man, is exactly what it is. When it's time for game time, when it's game time, you got to make sure you have your ticket, right? So Game Time will make sure you do that. Even if you wait, even if you're late buying tickets, whether it's because, well, you had to make sure you had the money, you had the budget, maybe you didn't get paid until the last minute. Don't worry about that. Don't fret. Game Time will take care of you just like you bought them in advance. And they even have seat views, the lowest price guaranteed. They have late ticket deals, all of that stuff at Game Time. You just need to take yourself out of it and the guesswork out of it and give it all over to Game Time. They will handle it for you. They will not worry about the fact that you bought them at the last minute because they specialize in just that. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code. I'm going to spell it for you. LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Make sure you download the app and use Locked On NFL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? No, it's game time. All right, segment number 2 here on Locked On Jaguars, where it's your team every day. We thank you for making us your first listen. Time to point out some subliminal finger pointing, stuff that I took inventory of, that I noticed, that I sat and I watched and I waited for the perfect time to bring it up and show you some things that I noticed. In the offseason, Doug Peterson does an interview, press conference. Doug says we're not big and physical and strong enough. Just like the year before, they asked Doug, what do we have to fix? He said pass rush. They never addressed it. The players improved and got better. So we chalked that up as, well, maybe they didn't mean we needed to improve pass rush from the personnel. Maybe we needed to improve pass rush from the guys that we already had, meaning Trayvon Walker and Josh Allen. And last year, when they were a really, really good duo, it almost brought a sense of, okay, those guys knew what they were talking about. They didn't address it, but you don't really hear people talking about them needing a pass rusher now. You talk about hearing, you hear people talk about depth, but you don't really hear folks talk about that anymore. So we gave them the benefit of the doubt that when they said that they need to get more physical, and I tried to tell people it wasn't just about one player. While Luke Fortner was the biggest, I would call it the biggest reason why the offensive line appeared to be so putrid, I said he wasn't the only one. And one of the things that, I understand that fans do a lot is they focus on the worst thing and just want that thing fixed, and they don't care. They say, if we fix that, we're good. And usually that's not the case. While that was the biggest problem, it wasn't the only problem with the offensive line. Trent Baalke decided that he was going to roll back with the offensive line. And the reason why I say Trent other than Doug, because even though Doug said, well, we just got to get those guys healthy. That sounds like a person that's hoping and wishing to just get guys healthy. That's all we need to do. We just got to get them healthy. That's it. Because he has nothing else to lean on, because they're not adding players first and second day. It seems like to me, Trent said, the guys I gave you are good enough. Remember when Baalke did his press conference after Doug Peterson did his? And he said, we're not bigger, strong, or fast enough. And then he said something about strength and conditioning. Not changing personnel, strength and conditioning. Do you remember when they were at the combine and someone asked them a question about alluding to what Doug had said? They didn't mention Doug, but they alluded to what Doug had said about being big and physical, meaning we're here at the combine. Are we going to look for the big physical guys? And Trent laughed a little bit. And I'm going to paraphrase what he said. I would say I'm quoting it, but I don't think I could get the quote right. Trent Baalke said, guys don't get big and stronger once they get to the NFL. I kind of knew what he meant with that. Usually with NFL, dudes ain't lifting weights to get bigger and stronger. They're lifting weights to have maintenance and just to keep themselves from getting off. But ain't nobody using up all that energy to lift weights during the week. I kind of understood that point. But he says they're born that way. You don't get guys bigger and stronger. They're just kind of born that way. And I recall Press Taylor saying about Luke Fortner when he was a rookie that they were very familiar with him because it seems like they had a relationship with the offensive line coach at Kentucky at some point. So I would say that maybe Trent was trying to tell us that Luke Fortner was a coach's choice. And I think that the last 2 years when Doug Peterson says what he said about what he thought the team needed, and that's not what Trent did. Okay, it worked out the first year, but this year, we didn't go get any offensive linemen. In fact, Trent went overboard to get defensive linemen. He drafted one on day 2, Mason Smith. He drafted another, his teammate, on day 3. They then signed Eric Armstead in the offseason. So it's like, okay, I'm going to give you more. We're going to be more stout in an area that was already considered a pretty good area because they were doing a scheme change, and the scheme change is what was going to work. So the point that I'm trying to make here is it looks like we're starting to get to that finger pointing stage where you can tell who wanted what and who wanted something else, and they went and did something else. Because rumors of a heated discussion between the GM and the coach, and it's just rumors at this point, about Mason Smith being a healthy scratch, about the way the reps are, that should never happen on a football team. If that stuff is going on and where there's smoke, there's fire, even if it's being talked about, it should be clear that that does not happen. The GM does not go in and tell the coach who to play unless he feels like he can. Or unless the GM has certain cachet with the owner and he feels like the coach would listen. And this gets to the lame ducks quacking. Why do I call it lame ducks? I'm going to tell you the circumstances that led to Doug Peterson getting hired, some of the fibs that were told, and why a guy like Trent Baalke would advocate for Doug Peterson over somebody else who they probably were considering giving that job? I'll tell you in just a second here on Locked On Jaguars. FanDuel is America's #1 sports book, and it's where you need to be, man. Now that the games are being played again, your life on FanDuel should be happy, happy, happy. All right. You've heard us talk about FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. Well, we have something different for you. Now, through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. If you're a Jaguar fan and you don't live in our market, you do this, and you're going to be able to see them play this Sunday. Then, with the YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out-of-market game. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment, and you can cancel at any time. Visit FanDuel.com and download America's #1 sportsbook. Remember, FanDuel has a wealth of knowledge where you can read up on everything and know exactly who's going to play and exactly who's hurt, who's not, and then make an informed decision. Like I said, just visit FanDuel.com. It is America's #1 sportsbook. All right, third and final segment here on Locked On Jaguars, where it's your team every day. If I was Trent Baalke and I had been a GM before and I knew I only had one chance to be a GM, I would not hire. If I could convince the owner, I probably wouldn't do this, but I'm saying if I was a guy like that, I would convince the owner to hire somebody who's in the same situation as I am, not somebody who probably didn't want me there, not somebody who was a first timer who could always go in and say, look, I need my own people. No, I go hire a coach that got fired right after he won a Super Bowl, knowing that that coach knows he can't get probably a third shot. He don't get a third bite at the apple. So a guy like that probably wants to come in here, and he's probably a little more eager, or he's probably less inclined to disagree with me too much and not appear to be combative. He'll work probably better for me, and he'll probably let me get away with more stuff under the guise of us working together, because we're both in the same situation. And if we both get run a second time, neither one of us will ever be in this position again. I'm only offering that to you. And that's what I mean about lame ducks quacking, because what it becomes is it becomes a situation where it's CYA, cover your you know what. And we've seen that in the past. It becomes a situation where there's no accountability. It becomes a situation where all you hear is apathy, and then you start hearing things two games into the year about Trevor said maybe we had a good plan, maybe it wasn't good. Travis Etienne saying we don't need talented players, we need people that work hard. And he may not have been talking about players. It gets to the point where when you see body language is off, that means whoever's speaking, the message is gone. You can see that at Florida State and other places where when you know a coach is, when they're not listening anymore. And it's never inconspicuous who you don't hear from. You don't hear from people like Trent Baalke because they just let it happen. I think the Jaguars' troubles start with Shad Khan. And those troubles start with Shad Khan, not because he doesn't want to win, not because he doesn't care, because the money's going to come anyway. I've seen him. He wants to win. I saw Mark Lamping the other day. One of the things he said to me is, got to win. They got the stadium deal. Those people want to win. The problem is they keep depending on folks that think about themselves instead of thinking about the team. We have given the benefit of the doubt. I told people we ain't wearing clown emojis. I even credited Trent with doing some of the things that he did. Some of them I liked. I liked the Eric Armstead signing. I did. I understood the Gabe Davis signing. Wasn't my favorite, but I understood it. I liked the drafting of Anton Harrison. I wasn't mad at the Tank Bigsby pick. I wasn't angry at none of those things. Urban Meyer was hard to defend, and I would never do that. But we kind of blamed the whole thing on Urban Meyer, and we didn't take into account that maybe Trent Baalke had something to do with it. And I say I probably did, but I'm talking about collectively, everybody as a whole. Just because we fall into this category is we want to get rid of the worst part, the one rotten part of this thing we see. We're going to cut that out. We're going to prune it, is the way they talk about when they do a tree. You prune it and you take it out, and then you take another part of another tree and you plug that in. I get that. It's never just one thing in football or sports. It's never just the biggest thing. And it just seems like to me now, with all of this dysfunction that I'm hearing about, and trust me, I'm not just hearing about it on social media. I got contacts that tell. Somebody told a friend of mine who used to be in the building, who's not in the building, or somebody said, pray for us. Literally, when you hear somebody say, pray for us, you know what's going on around here. It sounds like that man is up to those tricks again. The tricks of self-containment, the tricks of covering himself. And that success at the end of 2020 might have been the worst thing that happened to the Jacksonville Jaguars organization, because they look and sound, after 2 weeks, they look and sound just like the team at the end of 2021. They look and sound dysfunctional. They don't seem like they have the answers, or they do have the answers, but it doesn't benefit them to tell you what those answers are. And the answer is to point right back at the other person, or maybe want to kick themselves a little bit too. And the reason why is because they should have known not to fall for it. The same way the fans have been telling me, I knew better. I shouldn't have fallen for it. And the same thing I'm telling you right now is this. While I hope it isn't true, and if it does not happen, I will come on here and say, my bad. I think the Jaguars are going to get mollywopped the next 2 weeks, and they're going to be 0-4, and I think they're going to look to make a change. How big that change is, don't know. But my message to Shad Khan is this. Make sure when you do it this time, you do it all the way and totally start over with somebody else. You can't take any part of a banana if it's rotten. I'm throwing the whole thing away. Don't keep the little piece that you think is good, because trust me, you'll taste that rot in there. And that's exactly what is going on with the Jaguars. You better fix it now, because you got a $250 million quarterback that's yelling at people on the field, that is getting blamed for a lot of stuff that's not his fault, and that is flat out saying in interviews after 2 days or 2 games, yeah, well, we suck right now. Does your GM say the same thing? Or is he pointing the finger at everybody else? That's all I ask. Just Shad or Lamping or whoever. If you talk to Trent, does Trent say we? Or does he say they? Because Doug says we. Trevor says we. Sometimes the problem ain't the ones that you think it is. Ain't no problem here on Locked On Jaguars, and not on Locked On NFL either, because you get 2 shows on Locked On NFL. One from Tyler Rowland, the Madman, giving you a double shot of espresso every single morning, and then slide on into the barbershop with me in the middle of the day. Cool and mellow, but still bringing up everybody else's business, including the Jaguars. Make sure you check it out each and every day wherever you get your podcast, and Locked On NFL can be found on our YouTube page as well. All right, man, make sure y'all check me out every single day. We'll see what else happens or comes out. If I can substantiate any of these things that I'm hearing, I will do so. Until then, take care. We'll see you next time here on Locked On Jaguars.